The following is a conversation with Joshua Haas, the founder of Bubble. Bubble is a pioneering no-code platform that enables users to create fully fledged web apps without writing a single line of code. Bubble's users can describe in plain language what they want to achieve and can automate the development of the project on the platform. If you're interested in GPT-3, make sure to subscribe and check out our GPT-3 manual book for O'Reilly. This is Sandra and Shubham, and we hope you enjoy this interview.
Joshua, first of all, I wanted to take this opportunity to, especially to the readers that are coming across Bubble for the first time, or people watching us that are coming across Bubble for the first time, to give them a little bit of context of how Bubble came into being, the behind the scenes story leading to it, and becoming one of the leaders in the industry and industry standard. Sorry, for building no code applications. That would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to interview me. I think this is a very cool project, and I'm happy to participate. Yeah, so a little quick background on Bubble. The company was basically inspired by my observation that there's just this huge mismatch between the number of people who wanted to create with technology, build websites, build web applications, be entrepreneurs, and the engineering talent available to help them. Right now, building a web application in a serious industrial way, like if you want to build like a Facebook or a Twitter or an Airbnb or an Uber or anything like that, you know, like historically has required a real engineering team, multiple programmers with pretty deep technical expertise. And, to a total beginner, the path was maybe teach yourself how to code, which can take months to get to like sort of even a basic level of proficiency, then actually build your application, which is probably additional months, especially for a beginner, which frankly is just such a time consuming process for most people that it just poses a huge barrier to entry. So I had just, personally met and worked with a number of people kind of in this situation and had seen them pursue various alternatives, right? Like some of them tried to persuade an engineer to help them out. Often these were entrepreneurs trying to start a company, so all they had to offer was equity. And in a very tight engineering market, it's very hard to convince someone to work for you just for equity in an unproven idea, even if it's a good idea. If you're not already an industry insider and you don't have any background or connections or anything like that, it's just very hard to sell. Other people would try to scrape together a few $1,000s and outsource the initial development with the hope that if they got to like an initial product, this would be enough to get them in the door and get things started for them. But the challenge with that is, first of all, if you want really high quality work, it generally can get quite expensive, 20K, 30K, 50K. And if you go for cheaper options, you often get what you pay for, frankly. And then, once you get it back, usually the first thing that happens is you test it with real users. You discover that you actually should have had 10 different features than you actually did. But because you didn't build it yourself and relied on this outsourced firm, then you're reliant again on that outsourcing to like make modifications. So it is, again, a very tough path to go on. So having met people who had gone through this journey, I wanted to see if I could let people do it themselves by basically allowing them to really program, like have a true open-ended system that can create not just like a simple web page, but really a complex application, like the kind of thing that like if you wanted to create, an Airbnb or an Uber or anything like that on it, you actually could. Um, but make the barrier to entry low enough that the learning curve to get competent at it was, measured in hours or at worst a couple of days. So that basically the origin of Bubble, my desire to kind of build a solution for this. And the journey has basically been just working with real customers, seeing what they're trying to build, and just gradually over time growing this language basically that allows someone to express in very human-friendly terms, like, this is what I want it to look like, this is how I want to behave as users interact with it, and basically stripping away all the inessentials that make programming challenging, like understanding like servers versus clients, CSS, JavaScript, HTML, sending data back and forth, like hiding all of that complexity and cutting down to like the actual business application. So that's basically the concept, and we just kept iterating on this and iterating on this over a period of 10 years and built a real organic movement kind of around this tool.
That's great. That sounds like quite a journey. And we really resonate with the idea that you put together, the thought that you put together, right? Because the idea behind this project, the book that we are writing, is how to reduce the friction between ideas and execution. Many people have ideas, but they don't come from a technical background. So how to enable them, how to empower them with that kind of technology where they don't need any background, like removing those kind of barriers, and how to enable them to create something on their own. So I guess we highly resonate with what Bubble is doing, and what we are trying to do with our book. And following up on that, Joshua, so right now Bubble actually started this era of no code where it has onboarded a lot of people, and it's really good to see what you have built so far. And where do you think we stand in this era of no code, and how do you see it evolving forward with your vision, with the vision that you have at Bubble, with the roadmap that you have, and even in general with all the other companies and competitors around?
Yeah, definitely. So I think no code has jumped over the first major hurdle, but there's still a second major hurdle in front of it, and that's kind of what we're working on right now. So the first hurdle, and this is when we initially started working on it, the feedback we got over and over again from investors, advisors, everyone we talked to about whether this was a good idea was, can you make something that is simple enough that someone, maybe they're comfortable with computers or whatever, but they're not programmers, they don't have training, can pick up and learn, but at the same time, powerful enough that you can actually truly replace programming and have that flexibility to handle a bunch of use cases. So that was sort of the initial challenge. And I think the no-code movement has proved that this is very possible. And there's various companies along that spectrum, from super simple but a little inflexible to more difficult but very open-ended. I would say we're at the extreme of the flexible and open-ended, because that's personally what I find exciting, the ability to like turn sort of an ordinary person into a programmer or a software developer. And there's a cost to that. Like Bubble, takes days to learn, whereas some no-code tools on the market, you can pick up in a couple of minutes. But the benefit of that investment of days is you truly can build pretty much almost anything. So I consider that box kind of checked off. We're still investing in making Bubble easier to learn, and I think a lot of the no-code space is still doing work in that. But I think the reason the no-code movement has gone as big as it has is because at least it's been proven possible, and now it's just about refining it and making it better. The second real hurdle is basically making no code as good as or better than code, and actually replacing soft code as the primary way of building applications. So today we have engineers using Bubble, people who certainly know how to write code and could sit down and bang out, using a traditional programming language. They're choosing to use Bubble because it's just faster and more direct, right? Like if you kind of look at the history of software development over time, we've gone from very low-level, powerful languages like assembly, which can do literally anything, but it takes, years to write a complicated program in assembly, up to like more and more higher level languages like, C, like, Python and Java, that take away some of that flexibility. But for most things you're trying to do, that flexibility doesn't matter, and you can always extend those languages by dropping down to a lower level one if you really need to. So I view Bubble as the next logical progression in that step. Again, it's more high level than something like Python or JavaScript or whatever. And because it's more high level, it loses a little bit of flexibility, but you gain so much more speed and ease because you don't have to specify a bunch of irrelevant detail. And in the situations that you really need that flexibility, again, it's extendable by dropping to low-level language, in this case, JavaScript. So I actually view no code and Bubble in particular as a programming replacement, not as something to the side of it. And I think the journey for no code now is to get the ecosystem and tooling mature enough that it gets more and more engineers building on top of it, such that eventually the ecosystem switches to what I kind of view as a no-code first mode. Like when you're starting an application, even if you're a professional development team, you started in no-code, and then if you hit a barrier or a limit, maybe you extend it with code, but the platform and the stack is no-code centric. So that's what I see as Bubble's main job over the next few years.
So just like follow-up questions on that. Like while I was researching about Bubble, I came across these very exciting use cases that you have put in the showcase, right? Where people are building their own no-code platform using Bubble, which was pretty exciting to see. It's like doing something meta out of that, like using a no-code platform to build a no-code platform. So what are your views or some exciting things about those customers which you have seen through? Like what are they trying to do? Like you already have a no code and then you're using that to build a no code. Like if you would like to shed some light on that, we'll be really curious to know about that.
Yeah, so I think there's two main ways in which people are kind of using Bubble to build no-code platforms themselves. One is going back to what I was saying a minute or two ago about like the spectrum of speed and flexibility. Like, frankly, like you don't need the full power of Bubble for every single project, right? There is some things where really you just want to click a button and get an out-of-the-box solution because you're not doing anything custom and you don't need to be a programmer. You just need to easily and quickly create technology. So that's one use case for building sort of no code on top of no code, using a platform like Bubble to sort of pre-build some of these like faster, more directed solutions. And then the other thing we see is ecosystem around no code. So there's a lot of, we've seen a number of like marketplaces built on top of Bubble to like connect people with no code developers or to connect people with no code resources or no code training or things like that. So not really a no-code tool per se, but kind of the infrastructure and platform and community that needs to surround any kind of software creation platform.
That is such a fascinating mission to have. I love that you're guys doing it, and so you're considered pioneers in the movement of no code, which is gaining traction, which is gaining more and more eyeballs every day. And we are also curious to learn from you, perhaps some sort of words of wisdom on what was it like for you when you tried to, as you mentioned, overcome this hurdle of providing powerful capabilities, but at the same time having this friendly UX UI for people that don't code. What was like the most challenging thing about it, and how did you overcome it? For thinking about people that are starting right now to provide no code solutions and potential setbacks that they may encounter at this stage.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the hardest challenge is ultimately the sheer diversity of things that people want to do, right? Because someone goes down this path when an out of the box tool doesn't serve their needs, right? Like, if you look at things like, Shopify or, Squarespace or tools like that, they're amazing, right? Like if what you are trying to create sort of fits into the mold that the creators of those tools imagine, it's incredibly easy and incredibly high quality. So people turn to no code because they're looking for to put their own spin on it, right? Like a slight change, a slightly different flow, a slightly different appearance, some unique vision that they think differentiates. And we're long-term believers in that. Like we think the sort of like long tail of like differentiated, software and use cases is just going to get bigger and bigger as software gets more and more omnipresent. But if you want to be a provider in the no-code space, you have to wrestle with that sort of complexity and diversity directly, right? And it's very easy to punt on that and say like, hey, we're just going to give an out of the box, like, here's your answer, this is how it's going to work. It's also very easy to go in the other direction and add so many like settings and options and checkboxes and or fall back to making the person write code or whatever to get that customization that just makes it sort of drift away from the ideal of no code as being like relatively straightforward and easy to. So in our early product development days, it was really a discipline with real human customers. Like we weren't working in a theoretical vacuum. We were working with, I mean, first like one or two, but eventually five or six-ish customers during our early product development days, where we would basically talk to them on a daily basis, figure out what were they trying to add to their application today, and then we'd ask ourselves like, do we have a feature that would let them do it? And if the answer was no, we would always add the feature, but we'd try and add it in as general a way as possible. So we try and figure out like, what's the generalization of what they're trying to do, and how do we add a feature, a capability that would let them do what they're trying to do, but also let other users do completely different things. An example of this is our conditional formatting feature, right? Like users want the ability to like when they hover something for it to change color. We could have just built that feature. Like someone wanted a button that changes color. We could have just built like a, what color does this button change when you hover it? We decided not to do that. Instead, we built this conditional formatting where you could build an expression like, if this button is hovered, but you could also do if this button is, a million other things, then change a characteristic of it and then select the color and change the color. So by building it in a very general way, instead of giving them directly what they were asking for, we were able to hit this balance between that range of flexibility and the keeping the pieces simple enough that you can learn all of them instead of having just millions and millions of choices.
Those are some great points. Following up on that, Joshua, so with all these no-code platform becoming a norm, how do you see the conventional definition of a developer getting changed, and how does the job description of a conventional developer, which we used to call a software developer, going to change? Or in general, like it, I guess it will also affect machine learning engineers, data scientists, product managers. How this conventional definition of all these jobs, especially if we have to take something in general, developer will change, and how the no-code platform will affect that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's one of the things I think that's the most exciting about no code, like sort of the impact it has on people's careers, self-definitions, and like trajectories. So what I see it as doing primarily is smoothing out the spectrum, right? Like if you look in today's sort of job market, there's already sort of like a spectrum of technicalness, essentially, right? Like, you have on the far extreme, sort of deep systems engineers, the people who work on code that, is layers and layers and layers away from any kind of like, user interaction, and they're doing like, chip programming or operating system code or stuff like that. And then you have like, engineers who are, less sort of deep in the guts and more user facing, doing, like full stack development, building web applications, building, native mobile apps, that kind of thing. And then you have people who aren't full-time software engineers, but like have to like, write an Excel macro from time to time as part of their job, or like a product manager who knows enough JavaScript to, integrate with some kind of service because the product managers, engineers don't have the time to help them out with it. So there's like this sort of spectrum. What no code does is it just empowers the casual end of the spectrum, such that the whole thing is kind of shifted over, and what each person can do is a little bit more. So, maybe some projects just need a product manager, and the product manager job and the software development job merge together a little bit, right? I think there'll still be traditional software engineers because we're still going to have things of increasing technical complexity. But, instead of a situation where, PM starts programming and then, or a PM like, builds the spec and then engineers build the MVP, maybe the PM builds the MVP and engineers take and refine it using no code. So I think that's going to be the main impact on careers.
And that sounds really amazing and encouraging for people that are somewhere do not necessarily qualify also in the brackets and have variety of skills that can just empower them definitely. So as you know, we are writing a book about GPT-3 algorithm, and we are naturally gravitating towards curiosity about whether you're using any sort of AI tech currently in your platform, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the answer is today we're not really using it. I think the intersection between no code, which is this kind of new movement, and then GPT-3 and kind of the technology related technologies, which is also I think still finding its initial potential. These two things are like starting to move towards each other, and I think they haven't really collided yet. And I think there's a lot of very interesting possibilities, and I'm pretty sure if you interviewed me in 5 years, we will be using them internally. So I think there's a lot to say about what that collision can and will look like. So we can dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are also curious, like, about your your vision about potential scenarios of how these two trends could work together in the future.
Yeah, so I think there are two main points of collaboration. So one point of collaboration is what I think of as like the integration use case. So an application is designed with no code, and then a machine learning platform or GPT-3 or a similar technology gets integrated with it to work with the data that the application is processing. So it's kind of like a data level integration. The other scenario is the sort of assisted design integration, where a user is using a no-code tool that contains AI elements, and it's sort of like the integration between the two of them, where it makes the no-code tool more expressive and easier to learn because it's a little bit smarter, and it gives it almost a sense of empathy for what the user is trying to accomplish. So I think these are the two big buckets. I have actually seen some primitive examples of that first bucket, the integration bucket. The second bucket, I think, what GitHub is doing at the code level is kind of an interesting precursor. I have some thoughts on like how that's going to evolve and how those are going to intersect. But yeah, happy to discuss either of those two buckets in more depth.
Those are some really great ideas. Actually, like following up on that thought stream, do you think like with the advent of these large language models like GPT-3, the no-code platforms can level up the notch and can actually allow users to build applications from textual description or through voice instructions or something like that. I understand like this still seems like something that is still a far-fetched thing in the future, but still if we have to think about it, and because we are getting there, we have the tools, we have seen the capabilities of GPT-3, what it can do, how it can generate stuff out of nothing, just from the textual description, just from the natural language. So have you given any thought about using it while generating applications? Because we have also seen some demos where people can generate a basic JavaScript application using GPT-3. So how do you think about it, and how do you see it evolving going forward? And also, do you have any plans of trying this kind of thing with Bubble or integrating it with Bubble?
Yeah, definitely. 1 second, no background noise. Just let me turn it off. Sorry about that. Yeah. So basically, the short answer is yes. Like, I think that is basically where no code is going to eventually evolve to. The short-term challenge is training data, right? The reason we've seen it work with JavaScript is because there are massive public repositories of code, right? And that code is surrounded by comments, it's surrounded by notes, it's surrounded, so there's this massive set of training data that GPT-3 was pointed at, and that sort of gave it the ability to, start being able to generate applications like that, right? In the no code space, because it's newer, we don't have the same level of training data yet, right? But it's grown over time, right? Like, as more and more apps get built on Bubble, our collection of potential training data for an algorithm like that continues to go up and up. And I think it's basically a matter of time until it becomes technically feasible to basically take GPT-3 or the next generation of it, pointed at the collection of Bubble applications, and have it be able to learn to spit out an application from a textual description. So we're not looking at it today, because my general take on this is, if you kind of look at the relationship between what we're trying to do and what this sort of integrated approach would do, we view our job initially as defining the vocabulary that you talk to the computer in, right? So if you type in a textual description and you get out an application, that application still needs to be inspected and modified and viewed and discussed by a human. Like, a human has to have a way of talking to the computer back about, like, okay, did it do what I wanted? Like, are there things I want to change? So I view no code first and foremost as defining that vocabulary, right? Like, what is the simplest, clearest way to describe an application, such that when an ordinary person runs GPT-3, what they get back is something they can understand, right? And then I think the second step is then, once the vocabulary is defined, teaching the computer to use that vocabulary, so that instead of, like today in Bubble, if you want to build something, you're sort of manually drawing each piece, you're assembling all the workflows by hand. And it would be amazing to then be able to accelerate it by, typing the English description and having it just pop into existence for you. So I kind of see that kind of integration work as step 2, basically, and we're still working on step 1.
Yep. I really like the classification which you did, and I also see it in 2 different ways. So the first way is where you have enough data, enough applications already built, where you can train the model, or where you can actually give the fine tune GPT-3 to generate those kind of results. The other side of things is what we have seen with the recent releases from OpenAI, which is Codex model, where you don't actually need a data, whatever it can generate code without any training data. So especially in case of Bubble, where you always have this trade-off on what all trade-off between flexibility of features and the user's demand. You always thinking what features to prioritize, because there can be literally thousands of features that user can ask for that can be given as no code. So do you think like models like Codex can really help you amplify really help you amplify the speed with which you can provide the features in the form of no code, and can make it much more flexible going forward, rather than you building everything based on users demand and have to prioritize. If you have an AI that can generate code on the fly, and can give users the features which they are thinking and which they demand of, with very few hazards, with very few process in place, do you think this is something that you would like to use further, or planning to use something like that?
Yeah, so right, you're almost bringing up the third use case for a third integration, which is having a tool like Codex used by the Bubble team or the no code team instead of as part, integrated with the product as a way of accelerating the development. I think a few of our engineers have like dabbled with it a little bit. We haven't put it into widespread use at Bubble. For a couple reasons. One is we're actually in the process of converting our code base from CoffeeScript to TypeScript. And TypeScript is going to be much easier to use a tool like Codex with, because Codex has seen a lot more TypeScript in the wild than it's seen CoffeeScript, just based on ecosystem support. And then also, my understanding is Codex is a little bit of a learned skill. In other words, it helps you, but you have to know how to take the best advantage of it as a programmer to sort of accelerate yourself while still producing good code. The way I've heard it expressed is it's really super, super intelligent copy pasting from Stack Overflow. Right, like a very common programmer pattern is like, how do I solve this problem? Has someone written code already? I Google it. I probably end up on Stack Overflow or maybe GitHub, and then I find a chunk of public domain code, copy it, paste in, edit it to my needs. Something like Codex accelerates that process by doing the search for you and then pre-customizing the code. It does the work of like figuring out how to integrate it with your application. So I think it's a very powerful tool for accelerating development. Again, we're still in the very early days of using it internally or working with it, and it still needs a skilled engineer, I think, at the other end to kind of manage and run with it. So, but yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, there's the level of having a tool like Codex that speaks no code, but there's also using a tool like Codex directly to help engineers extend the no code platform more quickly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. So right now in the AI department, we have entered this very interesting phase where sophisticated models are provided as model as a service. Very new thing, a very exciting thing, and also lowering the barrier of entry to these amazing AI capabilities. And we're thinking that perhaps when it's combined with the coming no-code applications covering more and more use cases, this has a potential to democratize access both to AI and to coding and to building AI-powered applications. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you sort of agree, disagree with how we see it evolving in the future?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the sort of like hosted model with sort of communication and integration with no code is a very powerful paradigm. We are seeing very early signs of this in our user base. For instance, if you go to a website called virtualghostwriter.com, this was a Bubble application built by one of our customers, and it's basically providing GPT-3 for writers as a service. So you sign up with it. It, I think, hooks up to, I believe, a hosted model where they basically use it to power interface for helping writers get over writer's block. You type in like kind of what you're thinking about, and it like spits out a chunk of text to help get you started or cue your brain. And they were able to build that, without writing any code. They were just able to like integrate directly with that hosted models API and build the application around it using no code.
Awesome. So I guess I have like a follow-up question on generally your experience so far with the no code. Like, do you think we will? Because I myself, for example, am a no coder. I'm not a programmer, and I tried, dabbled in it. It didn't really happen. Shubham is much more well versed in that department. So it's just my natural curiosity to wonder, what kind of level of understanding of building applications one needs to have in order to be able to interact with the existing no-code platforms such as Bubble, and whether you're also able to do that successfully without having prior experience with creating applications. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so definitely yes. As I was saying earlier, Bubble is probably one of the more complicated and powerful of the probably the most complicated and powerful no-code platform on the market today. And even with Bubble, we actually polled our users, and I do not remember the exact number, but it was at least 40% of them hadn't had like basically any relevant experience in app building or programming or anything like that before using Bubble. And experience definitely helps. Like, we definitely notice the learning curve is smoother and shorter for someone who has a previous, programming or app development background before trying Bubble. It also helps if they spent a lot of time on other like sort of web creation tools like Squarespace or WordPress. Like, all that background helps. But we've had people who started from basically nothing, and over the course of for someone brand new, sometimes it's like a few weeks to really get their head wrapped around it, but getting to the point of complete Bubble proficiency. So I think it really is true that you can start with almost nothing and become a skilled no coder.
Awesome. So I'm looking forward to that. As a sort of wrap up for our interview, what else can we expect from Bubble in the upcoming time? Do you have any sort of updates that you may be willing to share with us? Like what are you planning to update in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, looking sort of ahead to 2022, our big focus this year is basically platform maturity. Like I was saying earlier, we want to go head to head with traditional coding, and we want engineers to because like a lot of like non-programmers or new people to the software development space will look to engineers for guidance, even if they're not programmers themselves and they want to use no code, and they'll ask them, like, is this no code thing legit? Like, do I need to like learn to program or find an engineer? Or could I use no code, right? And we want the engineer answer to be yes, you should use no code. And getting to that answer involves basically making sure that our platform is world class and that hosting something on Bubble is better than you would get if you built your own team of engineers, which is possible because we can keep investing into the platform and share that with basically all our customers who use it. So specifically, our big focuses this year are just overall performance. Like, we want things built on Bubble to be lightning fast. A focus on security. So we're actually not yet like SOC 2 certified or ISO certified, and we plan to go for that this year and get certified. And then we want to keep on pressing on ease of use and speed and development. So one of the areas we're looking at is right now when you're building an interface on Bubble, you have to kind of like draw the whole thing out. We're looking at different ways of accelerating that in terms of like, would it be very fast to give users like, a pre-designed template to start from? Are there other ways of accelerating that so you get more quickly to something that looks, beautiful and easy to interact with? So kind of a boring answer, honestly. Like, it's not like, hey, we're gonna launch this cool new feature. But frankly, I think what the no code movement needs right now is not so much like exciting new feature, exciting new bell and whistle, but going to the core competency of being easy to learn and producing output that is, better than you would get if you wrote code, and just really, really investing on both of those buckets to make it very, very true. Because once it gets sufficiently strong, I think the natural industry momentum is just going to shift to using no code as the primary solution, rather than kind of like an emerging movement or alternative solution.
So according to you, where we stand at no code right now is that it requires a more of evangelism rather than the cool new features, because it already is a very cool technology and it is highly possible that people don't know about it. People from different backgrounds don't know about it. So it requires more of evangelism at where we stand right now, and maybe additions in the near future.
Yeah, I think evangelism is a huge piece of it. And also just like, refinement, quality, and making sure it lives up to its promise, right? Because it is very ambitious to try to be just as good as hiring a world-class engineering team. And to be honest, like, there's dimensions Bubble falls short on that right now, right? And we want to make sure that we're fully living up to that promise, and then we're aggressively evangelizing about that promise, because we think at the end of the day, like, that's going to make the difference between no code being a fringe thing and no code being the mainstream.
Yep, that sounds great. Actually, amazing. Do you have anything, Sandra?
No, I think we can wrap up here. Thank you so much, Joshua. It's been such an interesting conversation for us. I feel personally like we've learned a lot here, and we have great sort of insights to share in the book, where we want to portray the no-code trend and encourage others to dive into it, consider it as their potential use case, perhaps. Yeah, it's been a big pleasure. Thank you so much for sitting down with us, and we're in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joshua, for your time.
Yeah, great set of questions, great conversation, and I love what you're working on. I think trying to find more ways of empowering people to be part of this, sort of new technological revolution and not be left on the sidelines is just super important from a society point of view. So I'm wishing you the best of luck with your book, and it's a real pleasure. Thank you.